Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
History has a way of hiding its most fascinating secrets beneath layers of myth, colonization, and lost narratives. When we think of Utah's past, images of Native American tribes such as the Utes, Paiutes, and Shoshone immediately come to mind. But what if there is another layer of history, one that challenges our understanding of the early inhabitants of North America? Could it be possible that ancient Black Indians once ruled over parts of what is now Utah, long before European explorers set foot on the continent? The whispers of an obscured past suggest that the answer may be far more complex and intriguing than previously thought. There are mysterious petroglyphs, oral histories, and forgotten archaeological findings that hint at a lost civilization, one composed of dark-skinned indigenous people whose presence predates mainstream historical accounts. These accounts, largely ignored by conventional historians, point to a fascinating fusion of African and indigenous American heritage that may have left a deep imprint on the region. As we piece together evidence from early European explorers, indigenous oral traditions, and archaeological discoveries, a new and shocking perspective begins to emerge. Could these lost people have been the original inhabitants of Utah, later displaced or assimilated into other tribes? This article will explore the controversial, yet compelling evidence suggesting that Black Indians played a significant role in pre-Columbian Utah's history. Long before European settlers arrived in the Americas, the land was home to advanced indigenous civilizations that thrived through agriculture, trade, and warfare. In Utah, the Fremont culture, ancestral Puebloans, and later the Ute and Paiute tribes dominated the landscape. However, lesser-known narratives suggest the presence of Black indigenous groups, whose existence has been overlooked due to European colonial narratives. Ancient records from explorers and traders reveal encounters with dark-skinned indigenous people who bore little resemblance to the lighter-complexioned Native American tribes that Europeans expected to find. Some early Spanish and French accounts describe Negroid or Moorish features among certain native groups. These descriptions fuel speculation about African or pre-Columbian Black indigenous presence in North America. The question remains, were these individuals descendants of a separate migration, or were they integrated into existing native cultures? One of the most intriguing pieces of evidence suggesting the presence of Black Indians in Utah is the existence of unusual petroglyphs and rock art scattered across the region. Some of these ancient carvings depict figures with distinctly African features, including broad noses and thick lips, characteristics that differ from the traditional depictions of other Native American figures. Could these petroglyphs be artistic representations of a now-forgotten civilization that once called Utah home? Some archaeologists and researchers argue that these markings bear striking similarities to rock art found in parts of Africa, hinting at an ancient transoceanic connection. Oral traditions from certain indigenous tribes also provide tantalizing hints at an older, darker-skinned people who lived in the region long before European contact. The Hopi and Zuni tribes, for instance, have myths about people with black skin who lived among them in ancient times. These accounts are often dismissed as metaphorical, but what if they hold a kernel of historical truth? Could these legends be distorted memories of real historical events that have been buried under centuries of conquest and erasure? One of the most debated theories regarding Black indigenous people in pre-Columbian America is the idea of ancient African transatlantic travel. Some historians argue that African navigators may have reached the Americas long before Columbus. Supporters of this theory point to the ocean currents between West Africa and the Americas, which would have made such a journey feasible. Ancient maritime technology in African civilizations such as the Mali Empire and Carthage was advanced enough to support long voyages. There are reports that Mandinka explorers from the Mali Empire, under the rule of Emperor Abu Bakr II, may have crossed the Atlantic as early as the 14th century. If these explorers or their descendants integrated with indigenous American tribes, they could have left genetic and cultural imprints that later explorers misinterpreted as an anomaly. If Black Indians ruled parts of Utah, their presence could be part of a larger story of African migration and influence in ancient America. The arrival of Europeans in North America marked a turning point in history, one that often involved the deliberate rewriting of indigenous histories. Colonial powers had an interest in shaping a narrative that suited their expansionist agendas. Indigenous tribes who did not fit into this narrative, especially those of African descent, were often ignored or erased. The doctrine of manifest destiny, which justified European American expansion westward, led to the displacement of many indigenous groups, making it even harder to trace the remnants of pre-Columbian Black Indian civilizations. Additionally, racial categorizations imposed by European settlers often forced indigenous people of mixed ancestry to choose between being classified as Black or Indian, a distinction that did not exist in many pre-colonial societies. Those with African features were often grouped into African American communities, further obscuring their native roots. This erasure extended into history books, where narratives of a diverse and multicultural indigenous past were largely omitted. Recent advances in DNA testing have provided new ways to uncover hidden ancestry. Genetic studies on certain indigenous and African American populations have revealed unexpected markers that hint at ancient connections between African and Native American peoples. Some studies suggest that African genetic markers appear in populations that historically had little contact with enslaved Africans brought over during the transatlantic slave trade. Could these findings support the idea of an older African presence in North America? Beyond genetics, the rediscovery of indigenous oral histories and archaeological artifacts is leading to a renewed interest in reevaluating the historical narrative. As more researchers become open to exploring these suppressed histories, the possibility of ancient Black Indians ruling parts of Utah is gaining renewed attention. The question of whether ancient Black Indians ruled Utah before Europeans arrived is one that challenges mainstream historical perspectives. The evidence, though scattered and often dismissed, paints a picture of a complex and diverse pre-Columbian America where different groups interacted, traded, and coexisted in ways that history books have often overlooked. Petroglyphs, oral traditions, and genetic studies all hint at a deeper history waiting to be uncovered. As we continue to explore the lost evidence of Black indigenous civilizations in America, we are reminded that history is not static. It is an evolving narrative shaped by those who tell it. The voices of these forgotten peoples deserve to be heard, and their stories deserve to be told. Only by looking beyond the dominant narratives can we begin to uncover the true complexity of America's past.